everybody's familiar with having something happen where your life flashes before your eyes is the same. All of a sudden, oh my gosh, I was near death. My life flashes. Okay. But for me, I describe it as a crawl. It was
Mhm.
a crawl of my life before my eyes. And as my life crawled before my eyes for hours, I got to reconcile a whole lot of life that I had lived, still very much believing that I was not going to make it.
Shift happens, opportunities change, and success is a choice. So when shift happens, it is our choice. Either we let shift happen or we can make shift happen. Hey everybody, welcome to the Talk Shift podcast. Craig Davis here. All right, I'm so fired up to be here. Now you notice that the studio is a little different, meaning it's not the Zoom background of my office, but I am actually here on location at my good friend and our guest today, and how fortunate we are to be here. And I want to introduce, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, so this is Thom Guerrero, the mortgage doctor, the chief, the broker of record of the mortgage doctor here in Modesto, California. And Thom and I got a chance to meet recently at an event in San Francisco. Arjun Dhingra, who many of you guys know, runs the LFG event, the Better Human Project, and as a speaker on stage. And Thom had heard what I was speaking about and had reached out and asked to connect. I said, well, absolutely. I love doing that. And we did. And we immediately hit it off. I mean, it was a bromance, I think, even before we even got going. But as I got to learn Thom's story, I said, oh my God, man, I need more of that. I mean, from beating death to succeeding in life to the zero paradox, which we're going to talk about and what that means. And Thom, as I'm just grateful and fortunate to be here today, I mean, I drove to be here with you, to meet you, to be in studio with you, to do Talk and Shift on the road. And that really is, like, this is the beginning of so many more conversations, and your story and the value you provide and I just came out of a meeting with you and your originators, and the culture and the energy and the vision and the direction, the strategy. I mean, everyone, here knows I could just keep going and going and going. But I just have to commend you that you have built such an impressive business, and I'm excited to learn more. And I want to introduce you to at least my world out here in the Talk and Shift atmosphere. So, Thom, welcome to Talk and Shift.
No, thank you so much. This is a huge honor to be on, and thank you just from seeing you on stage and saying I need to reach out to that guy, and I know we have so many parallels. It seems like as we've communicated more and more, but it's so great having you out here, getting to see you interact with our team and all of the nuggets that you have. It's great. So I appreciate that. Even our just conversation, like I was telling you, I have a bunch of notes. Every time we talk, I'm taking notes because I'm like, oh, that's a good one. Oh, that's great. So this is great. And the platform that you're doing is amazing too, to get this information out there for people. And so I'm really honored to be a part of that. And yeah, hopefully bigger and better things. Yeah. In the near future. Yeah.
No doubt about that. And the direction that you're on, I mean, that we're both on together. And I think that's the fun part of all this. I mean, just the conversations you and I have had. I mean, that's the reason why I'm here. I'm like, this is a podcast. We've had so many great conversations that we have to capture.
We've had like 3 or 4 podcasts, right? Probably.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And, and every time we talk, there's just more to unpack from that. But Thom, tell us a little bit about, I mean, obviously you have a very, very powerful story, and let's just kind of get into the meat of it. I mean, you faced a near-death experience, or maybe I would even go as far as to say a death experience.
Yeah.
Not only is the story miraculous and what you had to overcome and what you did, and we'll get into it, but how you have then come out of that and just crushing life. And I just think, I mean, it's beyond commendable. That's not the right word. But it's so impressive, and it's contagious. It's infectious. It's, and I just love that. So maybe share with everybody a little bit about, where you were, what happened, and then, we're going to transition into where you're going.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to give the Cliff Notes version of it. So Father's Day weekend, I was spending it with my son, picking him up. And usually I would take this trip to Southern California to get my son. And it was very, very commonplace for me. I'd make this trip probably a couple times a month. This particular incident, though, after we had a great weekend, caught up with family, had fun with some friends, and we're headed back home. And it just seemed like the entirety of the trip, there was something that was fighting me all the way home. And so my original timeline from leaving LA to getting stuck in traffic to having to charge my vehicle multiple times. Like, everything was just piling up. So it was one of those situations where, and that just kind of happens sometimes where you're like, I just got to tough it out. I'm almost there. I'm almost there. I'm almost there. So that was a lot of the day in a nutshell. And as I was approached, so this was with charging and all that, this was probably like a 7, 8 hour trip, right? That I had traveled with my son, and we're 40 minutes from home. I could feel my bed. I'm so ready to be done driving, get everybody tucked in and get to relax a little bit. And as I'm traveling up the freeway, there is this particular highway that I'm on. You can see the traffic on the other side, and so I saw a pair of headlights. It was acting a little differently than it I thought was normal. So it did catch my eye for a sec. So I noticed it, and as I peered at it, I kind of pulled myself up a little bit to get a little closer to the windshield. I'm like looking at it. I'm like, this doesn't look right. And then as soon as I said this out loud, I was like, I think this guy's on the wrong side of the road. Immediately the headlights were in front of me. So I was approaching a turn. And so I saw enough of a difference in how it was behaving, but not enough to clearly indicate this person's, it's not like I saw 5 miles down the road that this guy was head on towards me. It was just in this weird turn, the way that the situation was laid out. And so as those headlights all of a sudden were directed at me, time slows down. And so as time is just slowing down, I'm starting to reconcile what is about to happen. How can I avoid it? And there was a vehicle next to me, and I'm trying to calculate, how am I going to avoid this possibly? And I couldn't think of a good way to do that. My son is sitting on the passenger side, rear passenger. And so I didn't want to at all put him in a bad position. So the best thing that I could do at that point is make the decision. I'm going to hit this guy, but I'm going to move my car over without jerking it or causing me to do something else. I'm going to move my car over enough to where we're probably going to hit driver to driver. And that was the best decision I could make in the time that I had. So as I positioned the vehicle, the minimal braking that I could do at that point didn't really do anything. And it was just pretty much head on collision at that point. So at that moment, that final decision, I thought that I was making that final decision, but the thought was, if this is how we have impact, my son is probably going to have a chance, because if it's driver to driver, that'll absorb a lot of it. It'll free up his side, and that's what happened. So after impact, surprisingly, I woke up actually right away. I woke up before he was awake. So we were driving for a little while, so he'd been asleep. And so he just starts to groan a little bit. And I was in shock, because although I had already made that decision, I just didn't think I was going to wake up. I thought that was it. So, but I was severely pinned in the vehicle. So the steering wheel was in my chest. My seat had completely ripped through the floor and pulled the floor with it. So I was pinned in this position. The only thing that were free were my arms. I was trying to find my phone, trying to figure out how to contact someone. And as my son's waking up, I'm starting to talk to him and just let him know, hey, things are going to be okay. You're going to be fine. I'm going to make sure you get out of here. So I'm talking him through. And as I'm talking to him, in my head, what's going through it is, okay, I must have come to, because he needed that comfort, even at that point, I still thought I was done. Like, it was not oh my gosh, I survived at all. It was very much like, okay, I must have just woken up and, have enough of the ability to make sure he's clear. And thankfully there was a good Samaritan that came over, was able to keep an eye on us, make sure our car didn't catch on fire. The vehicle that struck us was burning at that moment. So I couldn't tell if it was that car on fire, if we were on fire. It was really hard to tell. No offense, Elon. I was in a Tesla. So immediately I thought, man, this is a ticking time bomb waiting to happen. So I need to get out of here, or I mean, not me, but my son needs to get out of here, was my biggest thought at the time. So he was able to get taken out of the vehicle. Once he was clear of the vehicle, I sort of began to relax, but that started the next phase, which was just this extended amount of time that I was trapped in the vehicle. Once again, still fairly certain that I was not going to make it out of there. I knew that I was losing blood. I could tell that I was bleeding from somewhere. I couldn't really feel what was going on under my chest because of how compressed everything was, but I knew that there was something wrong with my legs. I couldn't really tell what was happening. And in that moment, the way that I phrase it is everybody's familiar with, having something happen where your life flashes before your eyes is the same, right? So all of a sudden, like, oh my gosh, I was near death. My life flashes. Okay. But for me, I describe it as a crawl. It was
Mhm.
a crawl of my life before my eyes. And as my life crawled before my eyes for hours, I got to reconcile a whole lot of life that I had lived, still very much believing that I was not going to make it. And even the first response, I mean, the first handful of first responders that I talked to, but the initial first responder, him and I actually, ironically, we bumped into each other later on. And he was telling me as we were talking, I noticed it when he walked up to me. I'm sitting there, obviously it's a little fuzzy, but as he walks up, I turned and I said, how's it going, officer? And he looked at me and I could just tell in his face he was freaked out. And later on when I talked to him, he was telling me, he's like, I was certain you were gay. Like I thought, he's like, I just was already prepared. Like this isn't, this person has passed. He's like, when you turned, that was the last thing I expected to have happen. Seeing the vehicle, seeing the other vehicle, knowing the impact. He later on was telling me the story about how he was there so fast because he was trying to already turn around because it was reported. So he was trying to intercept the vehicle. So he knew
He saw the vehicle starting
he
to.
didn't see it, but it got called in. So he was the one dispatched. He flipped it. He was catching up, and in his head, he's like, "Please don't let it hit something. Please don't let it hit somebody." And so for him, it was a different experience too, because he was just like, "Could I have prevented this?" So he was feeling that immediate shock as well. But at that point, after my son was out, going through that process of reconciling, it provided a lot of perspective. And what I thought was, at the moment, I thought I was reconciling because once again, this is gonna be it. I was trying to find a way to call my wife. I was trying to use my car to call her. The dash wasn't working, but I was doing everything I could to try to sort of put all these pieces together with what I thought was the limited time that I had. And at the time, I just turned 37, and so you know, eh, a lot of the thoughts that I had were about the time that I had spent already, the things that I had positioned myself to do one day. We had some of these talks too. Some of the things that went through my mind was just about my son, the state of, the age that he is, the things I was able to impart to him, the things that I wasn't able to do, or the things that I was putting off because, one day I'm going to share this lesson, one day I'm going to do this, one day I'm going to do that. So there was a lot of it wasn't at all a bad experience, but it was a very cathartic process to go through.
Now, was this because you talk about the crawl and actually, and as you're telling the story, time, right? I mean, like instantaneously, you see. I mean, and give me a little bit of a realistic time frame, but I can imagine as we see headlights. I mean, for your brain to lock in and to make that decision to turn the car this way, to the instantaneous, impact, to waking up, to talking to your son, then you talk about the crawl, and I can't speak from that experience, but I can understand how time slows down in that moment from a
Right,
flash to a crawl. And so
right.
I hear what you're saying. Give me a little perspective of A, how long were you actually in the car trapped? And B, what that crawl was all of this going through your mind in the moment while you're in the car? Or was this after the
It was
accident?
primarily in the car. That was a whole lot of it. Yeah. So it was a split second, the impact situation.
Yeah.
So that
Right.
yeah, it could have been microseconds at that point, right? But that was a very instant thing. I did the best that I could. My wife jokes. So that, believe it or not, that was my first accident. So I used to have a pretty good driving record, and I joke with my wife all the time because,
Let's keep that one for one
well,
then.
yeah, no, I know. She tells me all the time. I was like, "Hey, I've only been in one accident." She's like, "Yeah, but that was really bad." Uh,
Insurance loves me.
but I was my dad, my father, when I was younger, he was really hard on us in a lot of ways, but he was also very much about getting us involved in activities and keeping us engaged and all that. So I actually had a motorcycle license before I had a driver's license for a vehicle, and I had to go through training courses and things like that. So as a driver, I'm pretty alert and try to put my phone down as much as possible. But in that circumstance, like I feel like that was some of the motorcycle technique where
Mm.
you are scanning. It's a system that they train you with for that. So I feel like that's what kicked in and helped me make that decision. But I do know it was a split second decision. That
Mhm.
was not a very long amount of time. Coming to after impact, judging based off of my son's injuries and where he was at and him still waking up, I was probably uh, cognizant within a minute to two after impact. It was pretty quick, so it's not like I was out for an extended amount of time. Just the fact that he didn't fully wake up yet, so that was pretty quick. The part of the crawl part of going through and the reconciling that took place over the span of probably 2 to 3 hours.
So you were stuck in the car, trapped in this position, unsure, uncertain, and you had about 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah. So I know that first responders were there probably within 20 to 30 minutes. And it's I'll tell that story another time, but getting to actually talk to the first responder that was there so I could verify some stuff from, their my perspective is a little tainted. So hearing his side, and I was like, okay, that kind of reconciles. But after he was under the same impression that I was, he thought that my vehicle was gonna light on fire. Because it's a Tesla. If the battery pack is punctured,
Mhm.
it's just a matter of time. So once my son was taken out of the vehicle, which probably happened within the first 30 minutes from them getting on scene. So he was standing away from my vehicle, holding my son, waiting for him to
Could
get
you
attention.
see him holding your son?
I could at that point I couldn't. He was behind me for sure, but he did tell me, he was like, "I have him. He's good. You don't have to worry about him." And I was like, "Okay, just make sure he's fine." Like that's what I'm concerned about the most. So him and I being able to talk and him telling his side of it, I know he was like, I was afraid. That's why I kept my distance, not because I didn't want to be there so you could see him, but I didn't want anything to happen to him,
Of course.
which was the right move. So in that span of time, was just really left to my own devices. He did talk to me initially before, but when I was like, "Get my son out of here," that's what he did. But him and I probably had a 5 minute conversation. Then my son was taken out of the vehicle, and then it was just that slow down.
And there's the crawl.
Mhm.
So walk me through what's going on in your mindset. I mean, because I know you had, and we were talking about this and sort of how some of these, and I don't want to say too much because I want you to kind of reveal
Mhm.
this, but these realizations and what was going on. Walk me through that experience and what was going on in the mindset and where that, started taking you.
I went through familial situations. I went through. I reconciled, my spouse not being able to call her, but what were the things that I would have told her right now? I thought about, you know, a lot of the disagreements that we had had and really how was that necessary? And I thought about the things that we had put off that would have been the, quote unquote bucket list item things, right? Stuff like that. So a lot of the reconciling initially was very much family centric. And, we kind of shared that too. One of the perspectives that I really thought about as I was going through this because there was the part that probably would have been quick was, oh my gosh, I'm trying to get a hold of people, and still thinking that maybe I could find my phone, maybe I can make a phone call, those kind of things. Once I realized, I can't find my phone or I don't know where it's at, and my car is not respond like the screen was on to a certain extent, but it wasn't responding. So I could normally call her just by touching my touch screen. So I'm trying all these different ways to contact them. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna go through like what would I want to say? What were the things that we would communicate about? So that part actually was pretty quick. And then after the fact, after a certain amount of time went by, I was like, okay, I'm still here. Like I was thinking I was having like a short goodbye initially, because once again, this kind of happened in layers. Initially thought I was awake to tell my son goodbye, make sure he was good. Then my son was good. I did the goodbye to him. I knew he was fine, at least at the moment. I reconciled some of those relationships. And then the next layer was where it really dug in, because the next layer of that process was, well, I'm still here. All I can do is think at this point, right? There's nothing out. There's no one to contact. It's kind of like one of those moments where all of a sudden your phone battery dies and we're so used to being connected and we have to stop and say, oh my gosh, I'm in life right now, like one of those, like, now it's a restroom trip that's not distracted kind of things where,
Yeah.
so you're like, what do I think about? And for me, it was a very much one of those moments. And where the next layer that it hit after I kind of got through family and relationship type stuff, it started to reconcile success to a certain degree. It went into business. It went into what I had done with my life. Like what are people going to stand up and talk about, right? Because that would be the thing that I would think would be coming next.
Thinking legacy, thinking about how are they
Yeah,
going to remember me?
and
What are they going to say?
and one of the thoughts that tipped that was when I was wrapping up thinking about my son, there was a thought that really, really hit me. I've said this a couple times, and I don't know if I'm communicating the best way, but the best that I can describe it, 'cause some people kind of take it a little offensively, but depending on your faith construct, most faiths have a determination that there's something after this is done, right? So my faith, I very much have this idea of there's a heaven, there's a place that's after, and that's where there's some sort of, peace, perfection, things like that. And I had this thought and it really bugged me. And I saw this idea and I'm like, okay, well, I'm here. And the thought was, okay, so I'm here, so I'll be okay. Like I'm not in this angst or this worry about where am I what's gonna happen after, I'm like, I believe in something and that's probably what's gonna happen, right? Because I believe in it. But this is the thought that really bugged me. It was the thought where I was like, okay, so there's a fork in the road. I'm going over here, right? And that's cool because I'll be fine. But on the other side, there's this whole other branch of reality that's going to happen after I'm gone. And the thought was, what have I done to impact that? And what are the things that I could have done that would have changed that? And what the best way that I could describe that is I almost thought of it as like a stone in a pond. Like there are ripples that are going to be created by this event. And I'm probably a little bit more sensitive to it. I don't know if I shared this part with you. I think it might have, but my parents passed away when I was really young. So my father passed away right a week after my 18th birthday. My mom passed away a couple days after him. So it was very close, very much like just getting into adulthood. So I've seen the impact of family firsthand, not having those parental figures. And I've seen it affect myself and my siblings. And it's affected more than that because it even affects us today with our own families because we've had to heal and try to grow and compensate. And so I've seen what that does. And so from knowing that perspective, starting to weigh what that would do, the thought that really came to my mind and it really brought me a lot of clarity and challenge was this idea that heaven after this afterlife thing that I was like, okay, I'll be good, right? It's not perfect. The part that is not perfect about it is that I'm leaving something behind that I could have had more or less of an impact on, right? And it brought to me, I had never thought of it like that. I had always thought like, oh, well, yeah, somebody passes away and they're going to be good, right? Or even for me, if I pass, I'm going to be okay. But I had never looked at the other side of that coin, which is like, okay, that might be good for you, right? If that's your belief system. But on the same token, there's that other side of the coin that's going to trigger things on this side. And that really, I had to reconcile a lot.
So, okay. So here you are in this moment and you're going through this belief system, you're going through the mindset, you're in this moment and I like how you describe it. There's sort of these layers that you're sort of going through and there's a fork in the road. I have a belief system and, and if I do pass, there's a heaven, there's somewhere I'm going.
Right.
But what I'm hearing is that, but I can't because I have like, it's left undone. Like there's a ripple effect that will happen, but you weren't okay with that ripple effect. There's more for you to do. You weren't ready.
Well, I didn't think it was still feasible that I was going to survive. Like I still hadn't reached that point yet.
Yeah.
But I did have to hard reconcile that the decisions, choices, and all those things that I had done, that was going to have a ripple into generations, like future generations, not just my son. I was like, I immediately was just thinking the next 4 to 5 generations of what that would do and what that would create. And it really made me consider, like, had I spent the right amount of time with him, had I taken the time to go through some of the harder lessons, the things I know he would need, but, I wasn't quite ready to go there, right?
And is all this coming into sort of light as you're in this crawl moment?
It is, yeah. And so it's kind of like you pull on one string and the yarn is continuing to go.
Yeah.
And same thing, like just if you saw a t-shirt and you pulled at it and you're thinking, oh, it's going to end there. And the more time that came on, the more I'm pulling at this string and it's connecting to all these different facets of my life. And like I said, going past, going into the success point, I think if from an outside perspective, and I'm not the one to say, hey, I'm successful or anything like that. Like that's not my MO, but I know that there's a lot of people that could look at my life and say, this guy's a top producer
Uh-huh.
or, somebody that's in this realm of highly productive person. Right.
Uh-huh.
And so, that it started to kind of shine a light on that, which was, okay, so I might have been in a place where I was chasing metrics in some regard, like this metric's important, that metric's important, this metric's important. Going to touching on the zeros paradox, the way that I phrased it is, I spent a lot of my life chasing zeros is really what it was. But what was I really looking at? The zero that mattered the most, which was at that point, it was the zero on my clock. That was the
Mhm.
hard deadline
Mhm.
of this is it, right? And how many of those zero metrics really mattered right now?
Uh-huh.
And to a certain extent, some of them were like, okay, yeah, I could see that that was useful. And then there was some where it was like, was that more of an ego thing than it was like this was really necessary? Or was the exchange of time chasing this instead of spending more time with this? Like, was that really worth it? Right? Would it have been more important to me at this moment? Which the answer was yes. But would it have been more important to me at this moment of where I'm saying goodbye, essentially? To have spent an extra day with my son to teach him a lesson that I can now see is going to ripple into his life, and these are lessons I have already paid for. I've already paid the dummy tax for,
Mhm.
right? And so reconciling that part, I actually wrote them down. There was kind of a list at one point where I was like just kind of data dumping like some of these things I thought about. But there was some very important where I was like, these are probably the top 10 things that as a parent I would like to impart. And I think on my list of my top 10, I maybe thought he had two,
Uh-huh.
and at the same token, it's not to say that I'm the end all be all, that he's not going to be able to learn it, just like I've learned without that figure. But it's still one of those things where you're like, man, I would have really have liked to given some of that direction. And if I couldn't have taught the lesson, I would have liked to have written something where it's like just something so the importance of what I believe this is and how that will impact your life and your family's life, right? So it was just some of those things that started to unravel as I kept pulling on the strings. But what was becoming imminent from that crawl was the balancing act of what was the most valuable thing. Did I truly have what is the most valuable thing, that metric? Like, was that in fact what should have been in the place that I put it, right? Because I put that there at the end of the day. And so I think that was part of that process for me.
And it's I mean, and again, the to capture the crawl moment that all of this is going on in your mind in this moment. And what I'm hearing, and of course, tell me otherwise, is like this almost like this out of body experience, this complete clarity and the zero paradox, like the paradox of what's a more important zero, the zero on paper or the zero on in time, right? The zero on the spreadsheet or the W2 or the zero on the clock. And all of a sudden that trade-off happens, right? And we chase zeros.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden kind of going from chasing this zero to realizing, wait a second, maybe I need to, I don't know if chase is the right word, but really value this zero.
Yeah.
And again, check me here, because what I'm also hearing is like, and I'm not done yet. And I'm not done yet because I need more of this zero on the clock.
Yes.
I have more to give.
So fast forward, and we can skip back to, but to fast forward,
Yeah.
there was, as I'm being cut now out of the vehicle, and I'm trying to, in my high performer fashion, tell the I'm trying.
Change the situation?
Yes, I'm trying to tell the crew,
Yeah.
why don't you just cut my seat? I can slide out the back. Like, what are you guys doing? Why are you cutting the pillar up? I'm like talking them through this, right? And they're just like, shut up. We need to cut your doorpost.
Yeah.
But it was at that moment of finally that last piece cutting and them grabbing me. And that's when the realization of like, I'm not done came. So that whole entire time, literally, even as they were cutting, because at that point I knew I was bleeding. I don't know how bad it was.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell the extent
Yeah.
of the injuries. I just know I knew this was bad.
Yeah.
Right. But it was that final moment where they grabbed me, and I remember them to guys were holding me and I'm telling them thank you. And I said it out loud and I was like, I'm not done. And
I'm not that you
yeah,
said those words.
I did. Yeah. As they're carrying me to the car, I'm like, I'm not done. This is like, I'm not going.
Yeah.
And that was in my head, that was the decision of like, no, if I made it this far, I'm good. Like, I'm going to be good. I don't care what this looks like. I didn't know if I couldn't, I mean, at that point, that moment, I couldn't really feel anything that was like under
Were
my
you in
weight.
pain when you were in the car, or
It, I mean, if you look at my injury list, which I've had multiple doctors say they've never seen anyone with my list of injuries like that extent be alive. But two of my primary physicians have said that. They looked at my chart before they met me and they're like, what am I going to walk into? And I'm just sitting there like waving at, hi, how's it going, doctor? And they're
I
like,
can totally picture you like,
Yeah.
like, hey, actually,
I have a fun fact, actually, just to veer off real quick. So, like in the hospital, which is its own experience in itself, and that's probably going to be its own book. But as I'm in the hospital, I'd have doctors that would walk in and they're like, "Oh, you're on a call. Are you busy? Should I come back?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, like 5 more minutes." Like they
Such
do.
a
Yeah.
consolatory.
One of my neighbors, literally this young kid, he was probably like 17, 18. He came up to talk to me before he left because I had probably 30 different neighbors. I was there so long.
Sure.
I was in a step down floor for surgery, so these people were not there for an extended amount of time, and here I am just sitting there parked. And this kid came up to me. He's like, man, he's like, you were really annoying me so much when I first got in here and hearing all your phone calls. He's like, and then I thought, like, I might want to do that. I want to do what you do.
Now you work
Like,
out, dude.
he's like, can I get your phone? I was like, he has my number. I'll call one day. But it's a really cool kid. But anyway, so going back to the car or being put into the ambulance. So that was the point where I was like, oh shit, no, I'm staying.
Yeah. I'm staying though. Do you mean like in life, or like I have more to reconcile? Put me back in the car, so to speak.
No, I was already done with that part. But
Yeah.
I was like, no, but I'm gonna live. Like
Yeah,
that's
okay.
more than that. I made a commitment to myself at that point. Although I said like I'm not going anywhere. My thought was like, one, I'm not gonna die, and two, I don't care. I don't know if there's cursing on your podcast.
Please.
Okay, but I was like, fuck this. Like whatever this looks like, I don't care if I'm in a wheelchair. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be fine.
Yeah.
And so right there, I was just like, I'm going to embrace whatever this is, and we're going to move past it. And I got stuff to do.
Whatever this.
And I've talked about that too with some of the speaking that I've done, which is, I feel like most people, and I think people lean towards one or the other, but I think in any situation you can vacillate between the two. But I think most people, when you sum it up, people have a victim mentality or people have a survivor mentality is the way I look at it. Right. And so at that point, I was like, I'm a survivor. Like I survived, and I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to survive, and I'm going to survive in any way that I have the ability to. But I'm not going to be limited by whatever the situation is. Ironically, I have that realization. I'm like, yeah, I'm in it. They knock me out and they put me in the ambulance, and I flatline on the way to the hospital. So as soon as I say I'm not going to die, then I die. So technically, it was a death experience briefly.
Metaphor in here, right? I mean, beyond like, here you are holding on, but as soon as like they get, okay, well, we're good. That's when things kind of almost like.
I didn't die in the car as I'm bleeding out, but in the ambulance, all of a sudden, in the controlled environment where they're supposed to save you, I'm dying. And so it's, and for a while after that, even though I wasn't cognizant, like my wife tells that side of the story where, every medical professional is telling her how the outlook is not good. It's very bleak.
They're kind of
we
preparing,
cannot make promises. Best cases, I'm severely paralyzed and I might not be able to do this. I might not wake up. Like they're talking to her about all of these. We're going to take both of his legs for sure. We might have to do this. Like, so she's getting all of that. And as they were they couldn't even transfer me to ICU or like a hospital that would be better equipped. They were going between. It was either going to be Stanford or Davis. I ended up being in Davis, so Davis is my second home.
Me too, brother.
Yeah, there you go. Right, we talked. Yeah. And but she yelled at the doctors, the whole team of doctors, tells me that story where she basically told them, like, you don't come in here and tell me you're going to cut my husband's legs off without telling me everything you did to avoid that. So she kicked into hardcore, and so then somebody pulled her aside and she thought that she was going to get escorted out of the hospital. And that's when they told her, like, we get it. He's a younger guy. I'm around his age. I totally understand this. Like what this hospital is saying they can only do is because of where you're at. Like, this is not the proper how our goal is to get him stabilized, to get him out of here. He needs to go. The longer he's here, the more risk he runs of them having to make these drastic decisions because they don't have the equipment or the knowledge base to like
Sure.
do anything outside.
Sure.
So they were like, hey, it's not them. It's like, this is the facility.
Starts-
Yeah, exactly. And so thankfully, that person was able to work through that. The social worker got me a spot at Davis, but then the next issue was like they couldn't transfer me because I wasn't stable. So
Sure.
they were gonna Metaflight me over there, but I wasn't stable enough to get loaded in the helicopter. Then I wasn't stable enough to even drive. So it was this whole thing where they're trying to stabilize me, and my vitals are just all over the place. But as my wife tells the story, I don't remember it, but I'm guessing it's from that moment of getting taken into the ambulance where I'm like, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. So they had sedated me, and they're moving over to a new set of IVs. The way that my wife describes it is there was like an entire wall of bags of all of these different things that they're, putting in.
It's the cocktail.
Right. So yeah, exactly. I just imagine like a Frankenstein type scene
Totally.
where they're tweaking all these little things, but they're trying to just get my vitals stable. And they were switching me over to this new set. So they unplugged, my current IV, and they were trying to put the new one in. And when they did that, I came to.
Interesting.
And I don't remember this part, but the way that she describes it, and I'm pretty sure it's accurate, but the way that she describes it is as soon as they took that off, which was whatever was sedating me, I immediately sat up, scared the shit out of everyone in the room. Because all these medical professionals, like the nurses, they think I have spinal issue, like,
Sure.
and I did. I had fractures, I had all this stuff, right? So they don't even know where to like grab me.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're just like, I can hurt this guy anywhere I touch him. Right.
Yeah.
But I sit up and I kick the bed down and I rotate to stand up to walk out. And they're freaking out. They can't, half of my leg is missing. Like, there's just all these things that are going on. They were not prepared for me to do that. So she's trying to run over because she sees this happening.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we can't. They're trying to talk to him. And then finally they're like, you talk to him, tell him to chill out. Right. Like, we can't like grab him. We don't want to,
Right.
we don't want to mess something up and all that stuff. And so luckily they were able to put the IV in again. And then I knocked out, and
But
I was
like
back
that
on the
will
table.
to live inside of you.
That's what that's the only thing I could chalk it up to. And like I said, that thought right before the ambulance was, as soon as I made that choice, then I was like, where's my son at? Because I'd already said goodbye in my head. Right. And I trusted that he was going to be okay. And that I made the best decision. I didn't know, but I felt like he would have been okay. But at that point, I think it was just like, hey, I'm here and I need to go find him and see how he's doing.
That was
probably the drive at
Yeah.
that point. And that's what my wife was yelling at me. She's like, he's fine. Like he's okay. But it just is a funny hearing that story. And I've talked to a couple of the people that now it's weird how many of these people I've gotten to meet that were there during some part of my process. Like I said, the first responder, I've met and talked to some of the medical staff that was there, that were assessing me, that were trying to put these pieces together, that were making decisions, talking to my wife. So it's really, really interesting. But I do think that just having that, and it's kind of goes back to what you were saying. Like, at that point, once the decision was, I'm not going anywhere, the next thing was like, and high performer, like it was, I'm going to get to work. Like, I got stuff to do. I got to go do some things. I had, kind of this whole, not necessarily an epiphany, because it wasn't an epiphany, but it was more of like a paradigm shift, right? Like, this is, I hadn't had a hard reconcile, even though I grew up and I've lived reconciling the fact that you're like, yeah, not everybody has an extended clock, right? It's funny, a lot of my peers that have parents and I talk to them, it's so foreign to me to be an older, now older person, older an adult that's dealing with these external figures. I'm just like, I've grown up without that,
Sure.
So it's interesting to hear that people.
Well, and to have this coming out of you that you won't repeat that.
Correct. Yes. And I think that was the biggest, and that's why I was also like, the mindset shifted to, it's the scientific approach, right? Okay. So I now I have new data and I need to apply it. Right. And that's really, anybody that's in performance or business or whatever, we're all scientists, right? That's all we're doing on a daily basis. Like, okay, here's that formula and that worked up to a point. Now I need to shift this or tweak this, right? to get better results or to have it more effective or things like that. And so that was very much the drive, leaving that crawl situation, the reconciling, starting to be introduced to some of the pieces that are becoming this zeros paradox in my head, where I need to shift my idea of what zeros matter. But there was part of that paradox was also wasn't just valuing something differently. Because I think that anyone can have a moment of clarity where you value something differently, right? We can have experiences that are more common where you could say, oh my gosh, like my kid is growing up too quick. I need to really dig into this next season, right? Things like that. There's little moments that we have in our life where you're brought clarity. That clarity piece was important, but I think the part that was more important for me was that this isn't necessarily an anti-success thought. This is that my impact needs to be greater with my life. And I think that one of the things I didn't look at before was I'm responsible for impacting this community, this world, things like that. Like I zoomed out and I was like, I'm responsible to impact that as much as I can. It put a higher emphasis on like what I'm doing. Those and it goes back to, we were kind of talking about this. And I've been speaking on one of the other chapters that I'm formulating right now that's using the analogy of chess, which is, I was just speaking on this and I was telling people, if you think about the framework of, life and how, we liken it to a game sometimes, right? Or at least my father did with me. One of my father's sayings was, life is an arcade and you only get one quarter, you decide how to play it, right? That was one of his things. I don't know if he stole that saying from someone, but either way, I thought he was smart because that's what he used to tell me. So I'd always think about that quarter analogy, but all of that's true, as we go through our day to day, it's hard to reconcile the fact that we are limited on the amount of moves. And I was just speaking and I looked at the average lifespan of someone from, let's give like 18. So from 18 to average lifespan. And I want to say that when I looked at that, I think it equated to something close to like 27,000 days and some change. So from 18 to life expectancy in the US, right? You got about 27,000 days. Is about 27,000 moves that you have. At the age of 50, that decreases to under 10,000.
Great.
Right? Yes, I know. And happy birthday, by the way. Yeah.
I turned 50 on Thursday. I'm going
I want to say it's like 9713, but
yeah. If I could stretch that to about 13,000 more.
But I think that it's not really about, like, some people look at it as like, oh my gosh, we need more life. And the reality is, if you look at some historical figures of some people that made prominent differences in the world, the days actually didn't matter as much as we think it did, right? We all think we need more, but to be honest with you, more is decadent in some ways, right? The more that you have, the less value it holds, right? So if you're like, oh, well, I'm going to live to, that's average life, and that's, 77 or whatever it is, right? I'm going to live to 100. I'm going to get 20 some extra years, okay? But at the same time, all you're doing is watering down, right? At that point, what is available to you. So now you can do less. And to me, and that's the way that I look at it with my parents. I was a little closer to my father, but I look at my father and the impact that he had with me, and he was a son of a bitch in a lot of ways. There's a whole lot of rants I could go on, but what I would say, and I'll give him credit, I'll never take credit away from him for that, is that he impacted my life in such a substantial way in terms of these paradigms, principles, business and life that he gave. I wish he would have preached a little bit or practiced a little bit more what he preached, but still he gave me those
in a short amount of time.
So I quote my father now more at the age of 40 than I ever have in my life. And I haven't talked to the guy in 22 years, but he's still there.
Well, and I can see the through line within this entire conversation, and kind of like we were talking about, and even I say, like, and I'm a coach, and I say, look, we don't need more coaching. We need more execution. 100%. And it comes down to maximization, maximizing our time, not necessarily that we need more time. We just need to maximize the time that we have. And I can see in so much of what you're talking about from that short amount of time you had with your father, but yet the impact and the wisdom you pull from that, the generational ripple effect that you're saying to yourself in the crawl of I have more to do. I have more to give. I have a reason for being here and this generational ripple effect that I am going to maximize my time on this planet, on this time and this being with my son, with my family, with my community, with my company, with my success, with myself, certainly. And I can see that, and I love the zero paradox, because and I hear what you're saying. It's like, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm sure in times of, those moments of clarity, yours is certainly the extreme version,
Yeah.
and, of course, I think anybody on their deathbed is going to say, of course, I'd rather have more quality time, quality zeros than quantity zeros, and that's,
Right.
but as we're going through life, and let's talk about that a little bit because, and I feel this way a little bit right now. I'm turning 50 on Thursday. My daughter's 15. She's a freshman. We have one. My wife and I are already like, we're only 3 years from being empty nesters, and I think about how fast time is moving now, and time, the velocity of time just seems to get faster now, and so it's like, how do we slow down? How do we maximize and trade those dollars, or and maybe that's not even the right word, but maximize those zeros on the clock, and to create those ripple effects, to create that impact? What goes through your mind now post event? And
It's most people aren't gonna like this, but it's I think, and I mean, check me on it, but okay, so let's go back to chess as the analogy. So chess is the analogy here. You have the ability to touch all these pieces. They're not infinite moves on a chessboard. At some point, even with the most drawn out game, there is an end point
mm,
at the game, right?
mm,
So like it will end at some point. So moves are not infinite, they're finite.
mm,
Okay. However, the pieces that you're accessing and the pieces that you're moving across the board are, every one of those moves is vital,
mhm.
right? However, you can draw out a game very easily by moving pieces that aren't effective, right? And so we were actually kind of talking about this at lunch a little bit. So this is something I've been chewing on. Okay. So for example, if I'm going to move my pawn,
Mhm.
I don't know how, do you play chess?
A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah,
We're going to get,
all
we're
right,
going to
you
play
can
some
bring me
games.
in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So side note, there's cognitive studies that have been done on chess and the effect that it has on children. So if you haven't looked into that, look into it. I was lucky enough, for whatever reason, just maybe because we were poor kids, but my dad brought home a chessboard one day, and that was like an evening tradition, was playing a game of chess.
Sure.
But I've loved the game from a young age. I'm not going to say I'm a master or anything like that, but my son's currently enrolled in chess
Right.
because I know there's benefits to it. Going back to it, so a pawn is a pawn on a chessboard until it reaches the other end of the board.
Uh-huh.
Once that pawn reaches the other end of the board, you get to choose what kind of piece it turns into, right? So a pawn can become a very effective member of your strategy
Sure.
if it reaches the other end, okay? Which is very analogous to life. So the worst place to be in life and in business is in the middle.
Sure.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So you're talking about shift, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
You get
So
me going about
yeah,
the
yeah.
dangerous. Oh, yeah.
So the middle is the worst.
Mhm.
Okay. But my theory is that the reason people get so comfortable getting stuck in the middle is because they don't feel like in the middle that they have a finite game that they're playing. It feels infinite. It feels like, yeah, maybe I can make the decision next quarter, next year. In a
Mhm.
couple years, when I get through this, I'm going to change this, and that. How many times as a coach do you hear that, where people are reconciling it's not mediocre, but I don't know what else to call that.
Well,
But
no, but we were just talking about this, and it's sort of like step into your ideal future now. It's not
yes.
I will be, it's I am. And that is that mental shift, and I talk about being a time traveler as a way to talk
Mhm.
about this, where you can step into your future today. And we establish that present tense. We plant our flag. I declare I am. And I went through a lot of that, certainly after I made my pivot, from and started my coaching business. And literally, it was a day, it was right around now, 3 years ago. I declare, as of right now, I am a coach. I am self employed. I am now in control of doing that. And everyone knew me from the 20 years of being in leadership in the mortgage business. And now I was introducing myself not as that guy, but now as this guy. I am an executive coach as of today. And lo and behold, my ideal future, my distant future became today.
Right.
And that was exactly how I moved forward from that moment on. That was my identity shift, which, we've talked so much about. Hey, thanks for joining me today on Talking Shift. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on our next episode.